In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 NBA games happening on January 23rd, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 NBA games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Indiana Pacers versus Oklahoma City Thunder. The Indiana Pacers visit the Oklahoma City Thunder at the Paycom Center on Friday in NBA action. On the surface, it looks like a simple heavyweight versus underdog setup, but the spread tells a more complicated story. The Pacers are coming off losses to the Celtics and 76ers, and they face the Hawks next. They have dropped 4 of their last 5 games, so their recent form alone is not going to impress anyone. Oklahoma City, meanwhile, has beaten the Cavaliers and the Bucks, and they get the Raptors after this one. The Thunder have won 41 of their last 49 regular season games, which is an absurd run of consistent success by any standard. In terms of availability, the Pacers are still missing key pieces, with Benedict Mathurin, Obi Toppin, and Tyrese Halliburton all out, while Quentin Jackson is listed as questionable. On the Thunder side, Alex Caruso, Jalen Williams, Ajay Mitchell, and Isaiah Hartenstein are ruled out, and both Jalen Williams and Aaron Wiggins are questionable. So even the clear favorite in this matchup is carrying a fairly long injury list into the game. Indiana has been in rough shape lately, that part is obvious, but it is worth remembering that they were one of the few teams to really push the Thunder earlier this season. Back on October 23rd, they lost by just 141 to 135 in double overtime. So there is at least some history of them hanging around against this opponent, even in a high-scoring, chaotic game. The Thunder have opened as massive favorites here, which is no surprise based on the overall trajectory of both teams. The Pacers might be getting healthier in some areas, but they are not stacking wins, so it makes sense that the market still treats them as large underdogs. However, Oklahoma City is not the automatic spread covering machine it was in past seasons. They sit at 23 wins to 22 losses against the spread, which is basically a coin flip record in that department. Since January 4th, the Thunder are 1 win to 5 losses against the spread as a double-digit favorite, and 3 of those failed covers were outright losses. Combine that with the current list of injuries, and this big number suddenly looks more fragile than it appears at first glance. So while the Thunder are clearly the better team and should control the game at home, their recent track record in this sort of inflated favorite role makes the spread less appealing. It is easy to imagine Oklahoma City winning comfortably on the floor without ever quite separating enough to crush such a big number for backers. With the Pacers still capable of competing in spurts and the Thunder showing cracks as large favorites, there is a realistic path where Indiana lingers just enough to sneak in through a backdoor cover late. As our first pick for this matchup, the Indiana Pacers to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The Indiana Pacers are averaging 110.6 points on 44.2% shooting and allowing 118.3 points on 48.3% shooting. They are shooting 34.3% from beyond the arc and 77.6% from the free throw line, while allowing 33.6% shooting from deep and grabbing 42.8 rebounds per game. The Oklahoma City Thunder are averaging 121.4 points on 8.9% shooting and allowing 108.4 points on 43.7% shooting. They are hitting 35.5% from three-point range and 82.6% from the free throw line, and they are allowing 37.6% shooting from deep while pulling in 43.9 rebounds per contest. Taken at face value, the raw averages make this look like a matchup that could easily lean toward offense, with one team scoring freely and the other giving up plenty on the defensive end. But totals are less about reputation and more about how styles mesh on a given night. Indiana allows a lot of points, but they are missing several key offensive contributors here, which can quietly drag their side of the scoring down. Without players like Halliburton and Mathurin, their creation and pace can dip, even if the general identity of the team is usually offense first. That kind of personnel situation can turn a normally free-flowing group into something more stagnant, with more empty possessions and fewer clean looks. Oklahoma City can absolutely put up big numbers, but they do not need to play at a frantic tempo for 4 quarters when they are heavy favorites. If the Thunder build a comfortable lead, they can slow the tempo, lean on their defense, and shorten the game in terms of total possessions. A slightly more controlled pace, plus some natural offensive slippage from a short-handed Pacers squad, quickly starts to chip away at the ceiling of the total. So while the statistical profiles might suggest fireworks at first glance, the combination of missing offensive pieces for Indiana, a focused defense from Oklahoma City, and the possibility of the Thunder easing into a more measured rhythm once they are ahead all point toward a scoring environment that can land below the projected number. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. New Orleans Pelicans versus Memphis Grizzlies. The New Orleans Pelicans head into FedEx Forum to face the Memphis Grizzlies on Friday night. It is one of those matchups where neither team is in love with its recent form, but one of them still looks noticeably more trustworthy right now. New Orleans is coming off losses to the Pistons and the Rockets, and they have the Spurs on deck next. They have dropped 14 of their last 16 games, which is a brutal skid by any standard, and it weighs on confidence, no matter what anyone says in the locker room. Memphis, on the other hand, beat the Magic, then fell to the Hawks, and they will take on the Nuggets after this one. The Grizzlies have lost 7 of their last 11, so they are not exactly rolling either, but they are at least treading water instead of sinking. From an availability standpoint, the Pelicans are still without DeJounte Murray and Jose Alvarado, while Herbert Jones has been upgraded to questionable. For Memphis, Santi Aldama, Zach Edey, Ja Morant, and Ty Jerome have all been ruled out, so they remain far from full strength too. Despite all that losing recently, New Orleans did show some fight in that competitive effort against the red-hot Pistons in their last outing, which gives them at least a small pulse heading into this spot. Memphis has not been at its best either, but they are slowly getting healthier around the edges, and they probably should have beaten the Hawks in their last game if a few things had broken their way. The spread is short here, which tells you the books do not exactly trust either side to dominate, but even with that in mind, the Grizzlies still come off as the better and more reliable group at the moment. They are at home, they have a bit more stability, and in a matchup between two struggling teams, that little edge in reliability means a lot. So while nobody is sprinting to the window to back either of these squads with total conviction, this still feels like a spot where Memphis can handle its business in front of its own crowd and cover a modest number. As our first pick for this matchup, the Memphis Grizzlies to win and cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The New Orleans Pelicans are averaging 114.9 points on 46.4% shooting from the field and allowing 122.2 points on 48.6% shooting. They are knocking down 34.1% of their three-point attempts and 78.2% of their free throws, while allowing 36.1% shooting from deep and pulling in 43.5 rebounds per game. The Memphis Grizzlies are averaging 115.9 points on 45.7% shooting and giving up 116.6 points on 46.4% shooting. They are hitting 35% from beyond the arc and 80% from the free throw line, and they are allowing 36.3% shooting from deep while grabbing 46.2 rebounds per contest. Put side by side, those numbers sketch out a matchup between two teams that can both score but also struggle to keep opponents in check on a consistent basis. Both defenses allow efficient shooting from the floor and from three, and both teams play with enough offensive output that the door is naturally open for a higher scoring game. When you combine New Orleans giving up over 120 points per night with Memphis allowing well over 110 on average, it is not hard to imagine a game where the offenses find some rhythm and the score keeps moving rather than stalling out in long, dry spells. Even with players missing on both sides, the core offensive profiles are still intact, and the defensive issues have not magically disappeared. So the overall statistical blend, two capable offenses, soft resistance on both ends, and solid free throw shooting points toward a realistic path where the total can climb past the projected number rather than slog underneath it. You do not need a track meet for this one to clear the bar, just a fairly typical outing by these standards, with both teams doing what they have done most of the season, score enough and defend just poorly enough to help and overtake it along. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Denver Nuggets versus Milwaukee Bucks. The Denver Nuggets head into Pfizer Forum to take on the Milwaukee Bucks on Friday night in what feels like a very awkward spot for both teams, just for different reasons. Denver is coming off a loss to the Lakers, then a win over the Wizards, and they have the Grizzlies waiting next. They have still taken 7 of their last 10 games, so even with the bumps, their recent stretch looks solid. Milwaukee just lost to the Thunder, bounced back to beat the Hawks, and now turns around to face the Mavs after this one. The problem is they have dropped 5 of their last 7, and that slide has started to shape the whole mood around the team. On the injury front, the Nuggets have ruled out Nikola Jokic, Cameron Johnson, and Christian Braun again. For the Bucks, Taurean Prince and Kevin Porter Jr. remain out as well. So both teams are missing pieces, but Denver is clearly dealing with the bigger hole, since everything they do usually flows through Jokic. The Nuggets probably felt a bit better about themselves after that win over the Wizards last night, but there is no time for a breather as they fly in to take on Milwaukee. The Bucks, for their part, just got humbled by the Thunder, which only adds more pressure heading into this one. You can see the absence of Jokic slowly catching up with Denver. They have now dropped 2 straight at one point, and the offense has struggled to find its usual rhythm without that calming hub in the middle. Now they walk into another tough matchup on the road against a Bucks team that is desperate to stop the bleeding. It is worth remembering that Denver narrowly edged out Milwaukee in the first meeting by 4 points, even though they were missing 3 key starters that night, including Jokic and Jamal Murray. On the season, they have generally been reliable away from home, covering in 15 of 24 road games. Oddly enough, they have also picked up 5 more wins on the road than at home overall, which is not something you see every year. On the other side, the Bucks are in that desperate times zone. They have just 1 win in their last 5 outings, and their star, Giannis Antetokounmpo, is clearly disgruntled. Some analysts are already talking as if it is only a matter of time before he ends up elsewhere in a trade. After hearing the home crowd boo him last week, that kind of scenario does not sound as wild as it should. Getting blown out by 20 in their last game against the Thunder only underlined the idea that, as currently built, this version of Milwaukee does not look like a real playoff contender. More than half the regular season is gone, and the Bucks are not even in the play-in mix right now, sitting in the 11th spot in the standings. The Nuggets are underdogs here for obvious reasons, the injury report and the fact they played last night. Even so, they keep finding ways to stay competitive, and they have been excellent on the road, with an 18-7 straight-up record away from home. Milwaukee, by contrast, just keeps dropping games and sits at 19 wins to 24 losses against the spread this season. At home, they are only 9 wins to 11 losses straight up, which is a big red flag for a supposed contender. Since November 1st, the Bucks are 3 wins to 6 losses against the spread when favored by 5 or more points. Since December 1st, they are just 2 wins to 3 losses straight up in that same favorite range. Oh, and the Nuggets already beat the Bucks a couple of weeks ago as 6-point underdogs. So yes, you can understand why the Bucks are still favorites at home, especially with Denver on the second night of a back-to-back. But when you step back a bit, the Nuggets still look like the more consistent group and the team in better overall form, even with the injuries. Oddsmakers have been fairly generous toward Denver lately when it comes to spreads, and that continues here. Jokic being out is a huge deal, no one would argue otherwise, and on any given night this team can absolutely stall on offense without him. Even so, this still feels like a spot where they can hang around against a Bucks group that looks disjointed and frustrated. You do not need Denver to completely dominate to make this interesting, you just need them to stay close to a team that has not earned much trust lately. I think the Nuggets can pull off the upset in this spot. As our first pick for this matchup, the Denver Nuggets to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The Denver Nuggets are averaging 121.4 points on 49.9% shooting and allowing 117 points on 47.2% shooting. They are knocking down 39.8% of their threes and hitting 81.5% from the free throw line, while allowing 35.3% shooting from deep and grabbing 42.2 rebounds per game. The Milwaukee Bucks are averaging 112.9 points on 48.5% shooting and giving up 115.1 points on 46.4% shooting. They are shooting 39.5% from beyond the arc and 73.9% at the line, while allowing 36.3% from 3 and pulling down 40.6 rebounds per contest. When you stack those profiles side by side, you get a pretty clear scoring picture. Denver plays with a very efficient offense, high field goal percentage, elite three-point shooting, strong free throw numbers, and enough rebounding to keep getting extra chances. Milwaukee is not far behind from deep, also sits near 40% from 3, and while their free throw percentage is lower, they still generate steady offense and extra possessions. That combination, two teams that shoot the ball well from outside and can punish mistakes, usually pushes a game toward a higher total. Both defenses allow relatively clean percentages, including from beyond the arc, and that often leads to stretches where the scoreboard starts moving quickly. You do not need this to turn into a track meet for the total to get there. If the shooting even comes close to these season averages, especially from 3, both sides can put up enough points to push the number past the projected mark. There will probably be runs, a few cold spells, and some sloppy possessions mixed in, sure, but the overall offensive quality on both sides still leans toward a game that lands on the higher scoring side of the spectrum. Given the efficiency from deep, the solid free throw volume, and the defensive numbers that allow opponents to shoot comfortably, it makes sense to expect enough combined offense for this matchup to finish above the posted total rather than below it. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Toronto Raptors versus Portland Trail Blazers. This matchup in Portland has a funny feel to it because on paper it looks close, but when you look at how these two teams actually live night to night, it tilts pretty hard in one direction. Toronto comes in sitting at 27-19, sitting near the top of the East with a grown-up defensive identity and an offense that is good enough when the ball moves and the threes fall. Portland sits at 23-22, right in that Western Conference mushy middle, riding a 4-game win streak after lighting up Miami at home. It sounds simple, but one group is trying to build something stable, and the other is still riding waves of hot and cold stretches. Here is where the roster reality check matters. For Toronto, Scotty Barnes, Brandon Ingram, and Emmanuel Quickley are all firmly on this Raptors roster right now and are not on the current injury report. Jakob Poeltl is out and not on this trip while he sees a back specialist. Jacoby Walter is also out, and rookie Colin Murray-Boyles is dealing with that thumb issue that has him legitimately questionable. RJ Barrett is the wild card, because depending on which report you read, he is either out or questionable with that ankle, so all you can honestly say is that his status is uncertain, not guaranteed either way. On the Portland side, everyone we are talking about here is actually a Trail Blazer at this moment. Denny Avdija, Shaedon Sharpe, Donovan Clingan, Jrue Holiday, Jeremy Grant, Robert Williams III, Matisse Thybulle, Scoot Henderson, Chris Murray, Caleb Love, Too Money Camara, and Sidy Cissoko are all confirmed as part of this current roster. Damian Lillard is technically still on the books but shut down for the season with the Achilles injury. Thybulle and Blake Wesley remain sidelined, and Scoot Henderson and Chris Murray are listed as out. Holiday, Grant, and Robert Williams have been bouncing between questionable and available on the reports, but they all played in that win over Miami, so unless something changes late, the reasonable expectation is that they are trending toward being in uniform again, even if that is still a projection, not a guarantee. Now, stylistically, Toronto is the team that wants to slow the party down a little. Their pace is down in the bottom third of the league, around that 98.4 possessions mark, which is not a snail, but it is not a track meet either. They sit in that top tier defensively in both rating and points allowed, and they score enough by leaning on their length, their switching, and a steady diet of mismatch hunting rather than fireworks every night. Portland, on the other hand, plays like that friend who shoots every time they touch the ball in pickup. They are top 10 in pace at around 102 possessions. They fire up more than 40 threes a night, and yet they sit at the very bottom of the league in three-point percentage at roughly 33.9%. So their whole offensive personality is built on volume and volatility, run, launch, crash the glass, and hope that the math eventually smiles on them. That is exactly what happened in that Miami game, where they went 20 for 50 from deep and looked unstoppable for stretches. It was loud, it was fun, and it was also way above their usual efficiency level. The situational spot leans quietly toward the roadside here. Toronto is rested, coming off handling Sacramento, and they have had time to reset and prepare. Portland is coming off that emotional, high-usage win over Miami on the second night of this back-to-back and riding a 4-game win streak that can make any group feel a little bit taller than it is. That kind of streak is great for locker room energy, but it often drags the line a little closer to the home side than pure strength would suggest. Honestly, this is one of those classic letdown spots where the legs feel a touch heavier and the focus slips a bit, especially for a team that leans so hard on jump shooting. Toronto has leaned into a smaller, more mobile identity without Powell, and it actually fits this matchup annoyingly well from Portland's point of view. You can see Barnes or Sandro Mamukilashvili spending time at the 5, surrounded by wings like Ochai Agbaji, Grady Dick, and Jonathan Mogbo, which gives the Raptors a bunch of switchable lineups that can bother ball handlers and shooters. Quickly handles a lot of the on-ball work. Ingram operates as that mid-range and pick-and-roll assassin, and Barnes fills every gap, from posting mismatches to pushing in transition. We already saw the ceiling version of that formula when they blew out Golden State 145-127, hitting 21 of 34 from 3 and making everything look easy. That kind of shooting night is obviously not their baseline, but the way they generated those looks, through size, pace control, and hunting weak links, is repeatable against a Portland team that has more enthusiasm than structure on many nights. Portland's recent surge is real enough to respect. Avdija has stepped into a primary creator role, Klingon has been a monster on the boards, and Sharp has been a human flamethrower when he gets hot. But the season-long numbers still label them as a slightly negative team overall, around 114.8 on offense, 116.3 on defense, for a net rating around -1.5. Combine that with being dead last in three-point efficiency despite the high volume, and you get a profile that depends heavily on hitting a narrow path for comfortable wins. That is where the betting market context comes in. Current numbers have Toronto as a road favorite in that 3.5-point range, sometimes drifting closer to 4.5 or even 5.5 at sharper shops, which tells you that the underlying power ratings already see the Raptors as clearly better on a neutral floor before you even account for rest. Against the spread, Toronto has been roughly break-even at around 22-23, while Portland has been slightly more profitable at around 25-18, so you are not sneaking in on some secret bargain. You are taking the stronger, more stable team in a spot that suits their strengths, a disciplined, long defense against a tired, high-variance, three-happy offense that just had a shooting party the night before. Here is the thing, when you stack rest, matchup, roster health, and playing style, the case leans toward the road favorite handling business rather than the home underdog pulling another hot shooting trick. As our first pick for this matchup, the Toronto Raptors to win and cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Now, shifting to the total, this number the books are hanging is interesting all by itself. You are seeing lines in that 224.5 to 225 range, which is the market asking whether we get another run-and-gun type of game where both sides live in the 110-plus zone. With Portland's pace and three-point volume and Toronto coming off that 145 to 127 explosion against Golden State and a 122 to 109 win over Sacramento, a lot of people will instinctively lean toward expecting fireworks again. It is human nature. You remember the loudest recent score lines. If you zoom out past the highlight games, though, the season-long picture for Toronto is a lot calmer. They sit around 22nd in pace, again close to that 98.4 possessions mark, and they have a defense that ranks in the upper tier of the league in rating and sits near the top in points allowed. Offensively, the funny part is that despite that Warriors performance, they are actually the worst three-point shooting team in the league by percentage, at about 33.6%. So that 21 for 34 night from deep in San Francisco is a huge outlier, not a new normal. Most nights, their scoring comes from grinding matchups, getting to the nail, and attacking the paint, not from bombing teams from outside. Portland feels like the opposite personality. They are top 10 in pace around that 102 possessions mark and rank near the top of the league in three-point attempts, around 41 to 42 launches per game, which is wild volume. Yet, they sit right near the bottom of the league in three-point percentage themselves, again roughly 33.9%, and their offense overall slots in near 20th in offensive rating. So you get a team that plays fast and shoots a ton, but not very accurately. That creates this constant push and pull on totals because the raw shot volume suggests high scores, while the efficiency numbers tug the other way. And that tension is exactly why totals for teams like this can feel tricky. The back-to-back context nudges things toward a more modest scoring script. Portland just played a high-tempo, emotionally charged game where their main creators, guys like Sharp, Holiday, Avdija, Love, and Camera, had to do a lot of heavy lifting on both ends. Fatigue does not always show up as obviously slower pace. Sometimes it shows up as shorter jump shots, less lift at the rim, and a bit more settling for the first semi-decent look rather than working deep into the clock for a perfect one. On Toronto's side, they are missing Poeltl as a vertical threat and offensive rebounding presence, and they may not have Barrett as an extra downhill scorer, which trims some of the easiest points from their usual menu. Without those pieces, they tend to lean even more on deliberate half-court possessions built around Quickly, Barnes, and Ingram. That style can still score, but it chews clock and limits total possessions, which matters for the number, not just the outcome. There is also the simple trend story. Across the season, Toronto's games have skewed slightly toward the under, sitting around 20-26 to the under, while Portland's games have also leaned that way, around 18-26 to the under. Those records do not guarantee anything tonight, and you should never treat them as some magic code. They do tell you that both teams have tended to play in scoring environments that run a little cooler than what bookmakers expected, which is useful context when you are staring at a mid-220s total. From a style angle, this particular matchup has some ingredients that slow scoring down a bit, even if the raw-paced numbers by themselves suggest action. Toronto has the length and flexibility to switch or stunt hard at the level on Portland's pick and rolls, which shrinks driving lanes for Sharp and Avdija and forces the ball to move 2 or 3 times before anyone gets a clean look. That sort of defense often turns possessions into late clock decisions, contested pull-ups, or extra passes that eat time. On the other end, Klingon and Robert Williams protect the rim well enough and clean the glass at a high level, which can limit some of Toronto's second-chance putbacks and easy dump-offs. The result can be a game where both teams have to work, where shots come from tougher spots, and where the combined score creeps along rather than racing. You can absolutely see this turning into a kind of first to 110 type of night instead of a full-on shootout. So when you blend the slow and steady nature of Toronto's offense, the volume without accuracy in Portland's shooting, the back-to-back fatigue factor, and both teams' history of landing a bit under market expectations, it points more toward a total that struggles to clear that 220 mid-range rather than one that flies over it. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.